Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Particle Image Velocimetry Fundamentals and Applications. I am Vivek, Senior Applications and Sales Engineer from Tescon's Fluid Division. Tescon is a distributor of Lavish in Germany and has been providing the laser-based diagnostic systems for flow field studies for over 25 years. The PIV technique was introduced by Tescon in India in the year 1996. We have over 80 laser-based system installations since then for a variety of flow and combustion research applications. Lavish in Germany is the leading manufacturer of diagnostic instruments based on optical techniques such as particle image velocimetry, laser-induced fluorescence, and light scattering. Today, we have Arun Raji, applications engineer from Lavish in Germany, who will be the presenter for this webinar. Welcome, Arun. This webinar will focus on the fundamentals of PIV and applications. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat box in your control panel. We will answer the questions after the presentation. Over to you, Arun.
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. Hi, everyone. Thanks for registering for this webinar on particle image velocimetry fundamentals and application. And this is Arun, and I work for a company LaVision as application engineer. And so we have Indian distributor, which is located in Bangalore, Tescon System India. So let's talk about LaVision as such. LaVision GmbH is headquartered in Göttingen and established in 1989. And we have offices in US, UK, France, and we have a remote office in India. Okay, and as a company, LaVision is actually we normally deal with laser imaging techniques. Okay, so we have many laser imaging techniques based on the parameters we are measuring. Okay, let's say for the flow characteristics, for finding the velocity, we use a technique PIV. Okay, and a PIV is actually planar image velocimetry, and we have other techniques like laser-induced fluorescence, Rayleigh, Raman, laser-induced incandescent, shadowgraphy, IMI. So all are laser-based imaging technique. So today we will cover only about particle image velocimetry for finding the flow velocity. Okay, what is optical flow diagnostics? Okay, optical flow diagnostic is an art of characterizing a flow in space and time by means of light scattering. Okay, why non-intrusive? Okay, so normally if we want to use any kind of intrusive probe, and if you are altering the flow, which is being altered, it's not so good. So it's definitely we need to go for non-intrusive method. So PIV, which is actually a laser-based, is actually a non-intrusive method. Why optical? So always seeing is believing. So optical always use light or photons of energy. So always seeing is believing. So whatever we see, we record it in the camera, and then we do processing and get the velocity information. So in terms of light, normally in the electromagnetic spectrum, so normally we use wide scattering spectrum for PIV. Normally we will use visible range, and also we can also use UV. Okay. Why laser imaging? So we have conventional methods, and then which is actually a intrusive and point measurement, and we have a laser imaging technique, which is actually a planar imaging, which is actually a part of PIV. Okay, the heart wire anemometry, and which is actually having a probe, which is an intrusive way of measuring the velocity at one particular point. And laser Doppler, again, it is laser, but it is non-intrusive, but again, it is actually a single point measurement. So to scan entire field of view, we need to rely on the traversing mechanism, and it takes time consuming, and it is actually can get only the turbulence statistics. Okay, but when you go for PIV, it is actually a whole field measurement, and it is a non-intrusive. Apart from the tracer particle, what you are introducing into the flow, and we can get instantaneous flow field. Okay, what is the difference between how the data for visualization and measurement technique should look like? So let's say if tracer particles are following the streamlines of the flow, then the data is actually qualitative, and we can use this data for flow visualization. And if the tracer particles are distributed homogeneously, and data is actually quantitative, and you can use it for laser imaging like PIV. Okay, the planar imaging has got like there are major components involved to make a, planar imaging. It's like illumination source, which is normally we can use laser illumination or LED illumination, and definitely a sheet, because for planar definitely I need to make a sheet so that I will work in the planar region, and then flow seeding, and then digital recording using camera, and then time circuit for synchronizing the camera on time with the laser on time. Okay, PIV principle. As you see, there's a flow which is seeded with the seeding particles, and on your left you can see there is a double cavity laser where it is pulsing two laser pulse, and it is passing to the sheet optics, make a planar sheet, and these two sheets are taken at a time interval of delta t, and you are freezing the flow. And these two pulses is actually synced with the on time of your sensor, and then you are taking two images at the time delta t, and these two images is divided into small integration window, and each integration window from first frame and second frame is we are doing a cross correlation, and then we are getting a correlation peak, and we are getting the displacement vector, and with a known time we can always characterize the velocity field. So this is a basic principle of PIV. So as I said, like you need to have 5 major components like laser, camera, sheet optics, laser, seeding, and timing circuit. Okay, so how the cross correlation works. Okay, so just you just take one integration window of a particle image, frame 1 and frame 2. Let's say this is frame 1 integration window, and then this is the second integration, meaning second image, one integration window. So I will show you like some graphics like how the integration is done just for one integration. So it just starts a cross correlation for first frame and second frame. It does a cross correlation, and it will tries to find the maximum peak where it comes. So let's wait until the graphics ends. So you will have a kind of a graph or a 3D a correlation peak map. Let's wait. Okay, once this correlation cross correlation process is done for one integration window, so normally it will determine the where the location of maximum peak. So this is the maximum matched correlation peak is there, and then this is the diameter of the correlation peak, and then you can get the vector magnitude and direction for this integration window. So likewise, if your image is divided into hundreds of integration windows, so you'll get that many number of vectors. Okay, the PIV design rules. How many number of particle images should be there in one integration window? So it should be like more than 10. And then in terms of in plane and out of plane motion, definitely the characterization or selection of a DT is more plays a vital role. You have to select a DT in such a way that, like in previous principle, I said like you have to select a DT in such a way that you're freezing your flow in such a way that there is a 1/4 of your movement in the X-plane or in plane motion of your integration window. So for inline motion, it should be like 1/4 of your integration window size, and for out of plane motion, your DT selection in such a way that it should not exceed the motion of the out of plane motion of the particle should not exceed 1/4 of the thickness of the laser sheet. And next is about particle image diameter. So normally when the particle which is projected back to your sensor should occupy at least 2 to 4 pixels. Okay, so examples of digital correlation. So on the top you have some of the example of the image which is occupying some particle images occupying 1 pixel, and see how the correlation after the cross correlation, how the cross correlation look like. And below you can see the images of frame 1 and frame 2. The particles are occupying 2 to 4 pixels in such a way that the correlation peak is very good, and the bottom one is actually very good images for getting a very good correlation peak. So the remedy is actually if the particle is occupying 1 pixel, it's always better to defocus it somehow, so that you can get a more particle size and more number of pixels occupied back in the sensor. So next is about particle tracking velocimetry. So the principle is actually used for tracking each and every particle, individual particle. Okay, the principle is actually detecting the particle, determination of position in 2D space, and tracking the single particle by particle matching. Okay, so limitation is that it can be used only for the low seeding density. So for example, less than 0.2002 ppp. So I will talk about ppp is like particle per pixel. So I will tell you later in corresponding slides about this particle density, all those things. Yeah, so regarding the principle of PTV, we can always record the images in single frame with the double exposure, or double frame with single exposure. So single frame with double exposure is called as autocorrelation, and when you are taking double frame with single exposure is called cross correlation. Okay, so when you are using this autocorrelation, there is always an ambiguity of direction, and when you are working with double frame single exposure, there is no ambiguity of direction. So limitation for PTV is about low seeding density. Okay. So next is about particle density, PIV versus PTV. So for PIV, so normally we have to use around 0.05 ppb particle per pixel, and for PTV is actually 0.02 ppp. So to understand the meaning of 0.05 ppp, meaning like if you zoom in, if you're getting the 10 pixel by 10 pixel matrix, in that at least 5 pixels should be there. 5 particles should be there, sorry. Okay, the illumination source. So normally for PIV or laser imaging, like we can use laser or LEDs. So based on your application, you can always choose what type of light source you can use it. So laser is actually light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. So you can have continuous laser, which normally can be used for time resolved or low velocity application. Okay, and for a pulse laser, you can also have a single cavity or double cavity. So normally single cavity used for time resolved information and also for low velocity, and double cavity lasers can be used for low velocity to supersonic flows. So but you can only get ensemble average, but for single cavity you can always get time average data. And for laser sheet, normally we use for planar imaging, and we have to use a volume illumination for tomographic imaging. So LED lights normally used for low velocity application, best suited for low velocity tomographic applications. Thus, you can also make a sheet out of the LED lights, but only restriction is that the minimum sheet thickness you can get out of the LED is about 4 mm. So main components of laser. So laser as such has got components like a kind of a active medium or gain medium, which is having a crystal, and you have excitation medium, like you can have a pump laser to pump the active medium, and you have a back mirror and front mirror. The back mirror is actually 100% reflective, and front mirror is partial reflective, and where the output aperture of the laser is. Okay, so the principle is actually when the excitation medium is pumping the light source to this active medium get excited, and once it is exciting, it will work with stimulated emission of light. And because of this two mirrors in this resonator, there is amplification factor happens, and when there is a population inversion, laser is ready for lasing. Okay, so if there is no Q switch, and this will be a continuous laser. Okay, so main characteristic of laser is about 3 characteristics. The laser is actually monochromatic. You can get one particular wavelength out. Okay, and then directional, it's highly directional, and then coherence, it is actually a same wavelength, same direction, and same phase. So this is the main characteristic of laser, why mostly people are using laser in the field of laser flow diagnostic technique. Okay, so pulse lasers. I was telling you about when there is no Q switch in between inside your intracavity resonator, and then it is actually a continuous laser. Okay, so if let's say a continuous laser always give you average power, and if I want to have a giant pulse or giant energy pulse out of the laser, then I need to use a Q switch in such a way that the energy builds up, and once energy is building up, I can open the Q switch so that the high energy pulse comes out. So there are two types of Q switch available in the market. One is about electro-optomodulator EOM, which is normally used for low-speed lasers, which is normally the flash lamp pump lasers. Acousto-optomodulator EOM is normally used for high-speed lasers. Yeah, so for EOM, the main component is about Pupil cell and polarizer. Okay, the Pupil cell, when you apply high voltage to the Pupil cell, it will always rotate the light which is passing through. It will have a circular polarized. Okay, and this polarizer will not allow this rotated polarized light in such a way that the laser is switched off. Okay, so when this is when the Pupil cell is off, the laser is on. So you can make on and off the laser using the EOM. For acoustic optomodulator, so you consist of a quartz crystal. It is connected to a piezoelectric transducer, and there is a RF driver. So RF driver gives you a high frequency, high voltage to this piezoelectric transducer, and this will generate a sound wave to this crystal, and this will make sure there is a photoelastic effect. Because of that, there is a diffraction. So when whatever the light passes through this AOM, there is a light diffracted. So by this, you can always make the laser off. So this is normally done at a high frequency of 100 megahertz. Okay, so next is about double pulse Nd:YAG lasers. So this is normally used for frame struggling mode PIV. Let's say you have two cavity or two resonator in one head, and it's actually two individual lasers like laser 1, laser 2. You can always see rod 1, rod 2. So there's actually two separate resonators housed in one single head, and there are two lasers coming out. So you have double cavity lasers. I said, okay, only for the YAG lasers we have this kind of non-linear crystals available, so you can always change the frequency, and then you can always change the wavelength. Okay. Okay, so next is about the sheet optics. Okay, normally the output aperture of the laser comes out with a beam. So we need to make the laser beam to a sheet. So because we need to do the planar imaging, right? So we need to make a sheet. So we need to have a sheet optics, which is consists of two spherical lens and cylindrical lens. Cylindrical lens at the exit, and there are at the input side of the sheet optics has got two spherical lens. So those two spherical lens, you can change the distance between the spherical lens so that I can change the focal point, and by changing a different cylindrical lens, I can always change the sheet height. So we have giving like -20, -10, -6, -3 focal lengths of the cylindrical lens. So based on that, -3 will have a 50-degree get diverging angle. Okay, so -20 will have like 10 degree like that. Okay, so CCD sensor, digital recording. So normally we use a camera for recording the scattered light, which is coming out from your seeded particles. Okay, so normally the CCD sensor has got more number of arrays of pixels. So each pixel is actually a photodiode or PN junction. So this PN junction is actually light sensitive, and it can accumulate charges corresponding to the amount of light which is incident onto this each pixel, and the amount of charges which is stored in this pixel, it is shifted to a next. Every pixel has got a masked area, which masked area will have a buffer and a shift register, and this buffer. So the charge accumulated in the pixel, when it is taken for first frame, this charge will be shifted to the buffer, and it is ready for second image. So the transfer of the charges from the first frame, the pixel, to the buffer, and it is ready for second frame. This is normally called as a time inline transfer rate. Okay, so this is normally used for double exposure or double mode PIV. So yeah, so this buffers later will be shifted vertically down and goes to the analog to shift register, and it goes to the charge to voltage converter. Okay, so the drawback of this is actually it reduces the fill factor, meaning each active area of the pixel is actually having reduced. The active area is reduced because there is a masked area wherein you have a buffer along the shift register. So the amount of light which is hitting the active area is less because the area is limited. So we need to have some kind of a lens, a micro lens on the chip or a sensor. Okay, so that we can always uh, deviate the light which is going to the masked area can be focused to your active area, so that the sensitivity of the sensor can be increased. Okay, next is about CCD parameters. Okay, so what are the parameters normally we should see when you are buying the CCD camera? So normally, when you are buying the camera, normally we should see the quantum efficiency, because like let's say if you are working on PAV and you are working with a 532 nanometer wavelength, so normally we have to see the CCD sensor which has a very good quantum efficiency for that wavelength. So the quantum efficiency is nothing but a sensitivity on the percentage scale. So sensitivity is nothing but number of collected photo electrons divided by number of incident photons per pixel. Okay, so next is about the spatial resolution. More number of pixels definitely increases spatial resolution. Next is about dynamic range or bit depth. So normally the cameras comes with 8-bit, 10-bit, 12-bit, 14, 16 bits. So all these bits are nothing but how many number of variations of grayscale I can store in each pixels. Okay, so let's say if it is a 12-bit camera, 2 to the power of 12, so 4095 counts of grayscale variation I can store. So next is about CCD versus CMOS. So as I already told you about the architecture of CCD, how it look like for the full frame interline transfer. For the difference between the architecture of CCD and CMOS, everything is same. The only thing is about the charge to voltage converter electric circuit will be also added to the next to the pixel itself. So each pixel will have this charge to voltage converter electric circuit. So because all since all this charge to voltage circuit is also added to this each pixel, the active area is reduced, but the transfer rate or the readout time is more, and also it will increase the readout noise, and sensitivity is less compared to CCD. It's much faster than CCD, and it also shows a lot of artifacts in the images, CMOS. And compared to CCD, the CMOS doesn't show blooming effects. So this is normally used for the CMOS camera can be used in the area where there is a lot of reflected surface, a lot of background noise is coming. Then definitely we can use CMOS because it doesn't show much of blooming effect compared to CCD. So next is about seeding the flow. So flow under investigation is usually transparent and clean. So in order to gather the stray light, definitely we need to inject some stressor particle inside. So the problem of this injecting a stressor particle is about providing a sufficient or homogeneous seeding inside the flow, and selecting the density of the seeding particle to be matched with the flow medium, and the contamination of the test streak, and the particle size is more important parameter while you're deciding. So inherent assumptions. Okay, so we always assume that the tracer particles are following the flow of field, and using the measurement technique like PIV, we are measuring the particle velocity, and which is normally equal to the velocity of the flow. And so selection of particles should be small enough, and then should not alter the fluid properties, and density of the tracer particle should be matched with the density of the fluid, and large enough to be visible. So light interaction with the flow medium. So when the light is incident on the flow medium with the tracer particles, there are three parameters is happening. It's about absorption of energy, scattering of light, and emission of light. Okay, so main thing is about scattering. Okay, because we normally recording the scattered of light for the PIV. All right, scattering is always divided into two. It's about elastic scattering, inelastic scattering. So elastic, what is done by elastic scattering? Elastic scattering in such a way that when the instant of light lambda wavelength is hitting this tracer particle, the scattered light is also in the same wavelength, then you can say it as elastic. What is inelastic? Like when the incident of light λ1 is different compared to the scattered light which is coming out, then it is inelastic. So the elastic is again divided into two, mean scattering and Rayleigh. So the difference between the mean scattering and Rayleigh, so mean scattering is normally a particle level and Rayleigh is actually a molecular level. And how you can, when you can apply mean and when you can apply Rayleigh. So when the diameter of the particle used to trace a particle as a tracer particle, if the size is more than the intensity, the wavelength of the light which is used, then we can always apply mean scattering. So when the diameter of the particle, if it is lesser than the wavelength of light, then we can always apply Rayleigh scattering. So inelastic scattering, we have again Raman and fluorescence. So mean scattering, normally we use a PIV for mean scattering is normally used in PIV, and so let's say in this example there is a one particle, which is when the light is incident on this particle, you can see how the scattering behavior. Okay, normally the forward scattering is having a larger intensity of light, and side you have a small intensity. And normally for PIV we use this side or small intensity area for observation or keeping our camera, because to avoid the saturation of sensors. Okay, next is about the particles or tracer particle, what we use it for PIV. So it's purely based on the type of fluid we are working on. Let's say if you're working with air applications, normally we can use oil bubbles or aerosols, which is normally generated by aerosol generator. Material normally we use it is like DEHS, vegetable oil. And for water, we can always use glass holospheres, polystyrene, polyamide, even oxygen bubbles. And for flame or combustion applications, normally we can use solid particles, which is of aluminum oxide, zirconium oxide, and magnesium oxide, titanium dioxide, and then you can always use a graphite. Okay. Okay, the seeding generator for air applications. So we have three types of seeding generator available for air application, like aerosol generator, Laskin nozzle, and then fog generator. So aerosol generator normally uses the atomizers principle, and then Laskin nozzles. So fog generators can also be used as smoke can be used as a seeding particles for the air medium. It can give you high density seeding density. Only thing is about the controlling of the seeding density is difficult. The particles for seeding flow fields, seeding liquid flows. So normally we can use polyamide particles. Mostly these polyamide particles are spherical in shape. Okay, this is actually good for the mean scattering. So because your scattering can be uniform, and the offered particle size by Lavoisier is about 20, 60, and 100 microns. So more the size, the scattering efficiency is more, and the particle density for the polyamide particles is close to water, and it is actually insoluble in water. Okay, and then fluorescent particles. Normally we use these fluorescent particles for the macro or micro PIV applications. For macro applications or micro PIV application, why we are using fluorescent particles is because to avoid background noise. Let's say if you have a more of background noise as compared to the particle signal, definitely we can use this particle fluorescent particle, and we can apply appropriate filter to the lens so that only the fluorescent signal goes to the camera and the miscattered background noise can be avoided. So this is actually a technique for avoiding the background noises. So we have different types of fluorescent particles available with different fluorescent dyes doped. Okay, the particles for seeding combustion flows. As I said, like we need to have metal oxides, like aluminum oxide, zirconium oxide, magnesium oxide, titanium dioxide. So normally we have to choose those particles based on your flame combustion temperature. Yeah, so the melting point should be more than the flame temperature. So, and also we are introducing helium filled soap bubble generator, which is normally used for large scale volumetric measurements. Okay, so for large scale, definitely in order to see, definitely we cannot use micron size particles because the make the homogeneous seeding in the large scale wind tunnels is actually impossible. So in that way, we can always use this helium-filled soap bubble, and we can generate neutrally buoyant bubbles of diameter 0.3 mm, and it has got a very good response time, less than 15 microsecond, and the scattering behavior is 10,000 times more than the micron-sized particles. And the construction of these generators can hold up to 200 nozzles. So each nozzle can generate 40,000 bubbles per second. So some of the examples I showed, like this is actually done for the volume of 800 by 800 by 1200 mm cube on the left hand side, which is actually a thermal air convection experiment. And the right hand side, what you see is actually an experiment which is done on a very big wind tunnel, where the actual car is placed and you want to see the wake of the state, right? The next is about the particle density. So to tell you that what is the right particle density or amount of seeding, what you have to use it for PIV, as I told you before, like 0.05 ppp is actually a very good particle density. We need to use it. So to achieve this, to how to select this, definitely whenever you see the flow, you take an image and then you zoom in, you take a pixel, you zoom into 10 by 10 pixel, you have to see at least 5 particles in that 10 by 10 pixels. Then your density, particle density in that flow field is right. Okay, so it should not be lower or higher. Okay, so lower, definitely the spatial resolution is reduced. Higher, definitely it will go for a good good for flow isolation, not for PIV. So calibration. So normally for 2D PIV, let's say you have a camera and your camera is 90-degree perpendicular axis to a laser plane. Then definitely I can do only scaling. Okay, scaling is nothing but just to place a known dimension scale onto the area where the field of view is, and then take an image, and then you can always mark the known dimension, and you can always calculate how many number of pixels is equal to how many number of mm. So we can always convert the image coordinate to physical coordinate. But let's say if the camera is not a perpendicular axis to your laser plane, and if it is having off axis, then definitely this scaling calibration is not valid. So definitely we need to go for a 3D calibration procedure, which I will discuss later. So I was telling about this 3D calibration procedures, when we have to use this. Normally when you have a non-linear image corrections, like let's say you have cameras like one cameras with an off axis, or two or more cameras, when you are seeing the field of view with an angle, definitely you have a perspective distortion. And let's say if you have optical distortions, like when you are using endoscopes, and then there is kind of a barrel distortions or cushion dash distortion happens. And if let's say there is a more optical refractive index changes in the line of sight of the camera, definitely you have optical distortion. So to avoid all this oblique barrel and cushion distortion, definitely we need to go for this 3D calibration procedures. Okay, so normally we use this two-level, we are using this two-level calibration plate. So we have different sizes of two-level calibration plate, which we call it as a 3D calibration plate. So so we have to select the calibration plate size based on your field of view. And also once you are selecting the type of calibration plate in the software will know what is the diameter of the dots in the calibration plate, and what is the size of spacing between these dots, and what is the depth between the first plane and second plane. So by knowing this, so it will always search automatically the dots in the first plane and second plane. So once this is done, we can always apply the mapping function, whether it can be a pinhole method or a 3D polynomial method. So I'll discuss like when to apply the pinhole mapping function, when to apply 3D polynomial function. So normally when you have only the perspective distortion, okay, and when you have a field of view bigger than the calibration plate size, definitely I can use a pinhole. The pinhole can give you the extrapolation of calibration for the extra region in the field of view. And when you cannot use this pinhole is likely when you have optical distortions, like when you have like when you're using endoscopes on the cameras, you cannot apply this. And when you have like a more refractive index changes in the line of sight, and definitely you cannot apply this. So in that case, definitely you should go for 3D polynomial functions. Okay, synchronizer. So synchronizer, I said, is actually a timing circuit. So we have external box which is actually USB based, and another one is actually PCIe based PTU, and this is actually all these two are in-house manufactured from LaVision. So we have around 624 independent sequencer output lines. Okay, and then the precision is better than 50 picosecond. So why we have this two type of USB external and internal PTUs, because like if the customer's external area has got a lot of influence of EMF, in that case the external USB going to the PC is little affected by the EMF. Okay, so in that case you need to have EMF control cables, or you should also go for the PCI based internal PCIe, which is going into the motherboard. This will avoid the EMF effect. Okay, next is about advanced techniques. So we will cover one by one about advanced techniques like stereo PIV, Tomo PIV, time resolve PIV, micro PIV. We have 2D stereo Tomo, and thermographic PIV, fluid structure interaction, shake the box, which is called STB, underwater PIV, endoscopic PIV. So we'll go one by one. So till now we were talking about the 2D PIV, where you have one camera seeing the laser plane and perpendicular axis or off axis. You can always get 2D, two-dimensional, two-component velocity. Okay, so this 2D PIV. So next is about stereo PIV. In this laser plane, this laser plane has got a thickness. In that thickness, if I want to have a W component, definitely I can get it by using a stereo PIV, which is actually a two-dimensional, three-component measurement. Okay, so using two cameras with an angle, and you can get the W component in the laser sheet thickness. Okay, and next is about volumetric or true volumetric or Tomo PIV, which is normally can be applied for volume elimination, which can give you a 3D, three-dimensional, three-component velocity at one point of time. So at one instant of time. Okay, so at one instant of time, you can get in that volume a three-component velocity in 3-dimensional. Okay, so possible arrangements possible for stereo PIV. So we can have two cameras seeing the same side of the laser sheet, or we can also have cameras on different sides, so that it can see the different part of the laser, one front or back side of the laser sheet. Okay, so the main component used in the stereo PIV is a Schindler adapter, which is placed between the lens and the camera sensor. So this adapter is normally used. So whenever you are seeing the field of view with an angle, when you are seeing with an angle, definitely the focus is not just one focus. You have multiple focus plane. So the focal plane. So because the lenses are having some depth of focus, so you can have a focus at the center, but the edges of the images will not be focused. So in order to have a utmost focus in the entire image, you can always use the Schindler adapter. Using this, I can always tilt the lens plane or image plane based on the configuration how you fix it. So the Schindler criterion is nothing but when the object plane, lens plane, image plane intersect one particular point, where you get a well-focused image, even though it is seen with an angle. So this stereo PIV self-calibration is actually a patented one from LaVision. So what is about? So normally when you are doing calibration, we will place our calibration plate in the field of view, and then we perform the calibration, and we remove the calibration in such a way that the laser sheet will be placed exactly the same location where the calibration is done. So there may be a chance that the laser plane and the calibration plane, whatever we did, is totally misplaced, or there is a kind of a disparity. So this disparity can be reduced by our self-calibration procedure in such a way that the calibration disparity plane can be reduced to the laser plane. So this will reduce errors in the calibration, and also the accuracy of the data can increase. So example of 2D PIV. So even though this is actually a hummingbird, the flow around the hummingbird. So normally it's actually a three-dimensional, highly turbulent flows. Even though it's a three-dimensional turbulent flow, we are using 2D PIV. So we are not able to get the third component. So we are only able to get only W and so U and V. So stereo PIV on surface. Okay, so from example on water surface. So like water waves with obstacle. So using those two camera, we can capture the depth, the W component. So you can always see the color contour, which is giving you a U velocity, and the vector component is giving you a W component. Okay, the true three-dimensional PIV, which is nothing but a Tomo PIV. So let's see the principle of it. Like, yeah, so you can always use two or more cameras. So each camera will give you a planar image. So from the planar image of a particle image, you can always reconstruct a volume. From the reconstructed volume, you perform the direct correlation and you get the vectors in 3D in three-dimensional. Okay, so that's how we do. So some of example, like for Tomo PIV, 2 cameras, you can also go up to 8 cameras. So this is an example for a jet in water. So the reconstructed volume is about 60 by 65 by 65 mm3. So some of the other examples like Tomo PIV and low-cost wake. So you can see clearly there is a volume elimination at the wake of your low-cost wing. So you can always get the information, the Tomo PIV on that. So next is about the Tomo PIV on cylindrical wake. So you can always see there are 4 cameras placed at the exit of the duct, and there is a cylindrical wake, a cylindrical rod, and the laser volume illumination at the exit of the cylindrical rod, and we are able to see the wake of the cylinder. So time resolved PIV. So there is actually, it's not about measuring high speed velocity. It is about getting the time resolved data. So high speed or using high speed camera and high speed laser doesn't mean that we are measuring the high velocity. It's about time resolved data. Okay, so there are 2 types of recording mode. It is possible for this. One is about continuous recording mode. Another one is actually a frame struggling mode. So what's the difference between how we are taking this continuous recording mode and the frame struggling mode? So frame struggling, the continuous recording mode is actually a single frame mode. So where you can always get the laser pulse exactly at the center of each camera exposure. Okay, exactly at the center, right? And then for the frame struggling mode, the laser pulse of the laser 1 of frame A can be at the end of the exposure of laser after exposure 1, and the laser 2, which is coming at the starting of the exposure of the frame 2. So that's how we can always reduce the time between the image taken. So next is about a micro PIV with fluorescent particles in volume elimination. So micro PIV, so similar, same principle as PIV. Only thing is about you have to change the lens what you are using before to a microscope in such a way that we can visualize the field of view of micron size. Right? Okay, so we have inverted epifluorescent inverted microscope for a 2D micro PIV. So normally we use not the sheet, we use a laser beam, which is actually a volume. And so the schematic or the setup would look like the laser enters the microscope and it touches the filter cube, and the filter cube is highly reflective for the 532, and it is entering the test section, which is actually a microchannel, which is filled with fluorescent particle. And this fluorescent particle, when it gets this green, it will emit the fluorescence signal, and this fluorescence signal will transmit through the filter wheel, and it will enter the camera. So the fluorescent signals are captured by this camera. Okay, the examples of micro PIV. So on microchannel of 200 micron width with 10x magnification, so with 1 micron particles. So you can always do the experiment. And next example is about 30 micron width with 40x magnification, zeroed with 1 micron particles. The data of micro PIV, 2D micro PIV. The next is about a stereo and volumetric micro PIV. So Normally for stereo and tomo or a volumetric micro PAV, we need to use a stereo microscope, not the inverted Eiffel fluorescent microscope. We need to have stereo microscope where you need to mount two cameras. The same setup can be used for both stereo and micro PAV. So the example what you shown here is about the plankton of 100 micron, which is recorded high frame rate of 1 frame per second, 1 kilohertz, using a stereo microscope. So the motorized option for both the inverted microscope and stereo microscope is available. So our software can control the motorized staging of the microscope for both the inverted and stereo microscope. Okay, the STB, the check the box, which is actually a most advanced 3D Lagrangian particle tracking velocimetry method, which is nothing but a 3D PTV, which can track each and every particle in 3D volume. Only thing is that, as I told you before, for PTV, the normal sealing density used for PTV algorithm is less than 0.002 ppp. So that is a particle density normally we use it because we need to track each and every particle. But for STB algorithm, we can also use the same density of particle which we use it for PIV, which is like 0.05 ppp. Still, we can always use to track each and every particle information. So next is about endoscopic PIV. So when there is a restriction on the optical axis, normally we can always use the endoscope for the camera and laser, and still we can perform PIV. And next is about thermographic PIV, which is actually nothing but a simultaneous measurement of flow velocity with temperature measurement for hot gas. This is normally possible by seeding the flow with a phosphor particle, and this phosphor particle is having a temperature dependence when it is when it is excited by the UV light. It will give you a temperature dependent phosphorescent signal, and this temperature dependent phosphorescent signal can be captured in the cameras with corresponding filter. We can get the temperature, and when you are recording the scattering of UV light, then you can also get the PIV. So you can always do simultaneous PIV with temperature measurement for hot gases. So next is about the fluid structure interaction. So normally it's actually a combination of techniques like PIV and DIC. DIC is digital image correlation to find the optical deformation on the surface of your material. So let's say if I want to see the flow around the airfoil, and then I want to see the deformation happening on the airfoil simultaneously. In this case, definitely I can combine this technique, and we can always perform the fluid structure interaction. So next is about the underwater PIV. So this similar PIV technique, only thing is about how we efficiently can keep the cameras and laser output inside the water, beneath the water, with a depth of 1.5 to 2 meters. And we have a special mechanism of watertight enclosures for both the laser and the laser output and the laser cameras. And the laser advanced techniques right now is actually we can always supply with Tomo underwater PIV. So we can always do Tomo PIV in underwater. Okay, so for other product range, you can always visit our website, lavision.de, for more details. And thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Arun. We have a few questions. What is large-scale PIV or PTV? How do you refer to it?
Large scale PIV is nothing but like when you have size of the wind tunnel size is of like a few meters, like 2 meters or 3 meters cross 3 meters of cross section. Okay, where I want to see the flow. Normally, we will need to use some kind of bigger size particle, and which is actually a neutrally buoyant. And in those kind of large scale application, normally the question is about how efficiently we seed homogeneously. So those kind of applications, normally we use helium filled soap bubble as a seeding particle, and then we can perform PIV. And we can also go for not PTV. It's actually the shake the box. We can also use those 4D PTV for those kind of applications.
Okay, we have another question. Please explain about shake the box.
Okay, so shake the box is actually, as I said, is actually a 4D PTV or 3D PTV in time with additional information of time information. So here it's follow the same principles. Like it will track the detect the particle. It will determine the position of particle in 3D space, and then it will project back to the sensor. And then only thing is about as soon as it tracks each and every particle, it will delete the information of those particles which is already detected, and it will go for next. So in that way, we can always go for highly dense particle density.
So we have another question. Can you please explain constant rate mode and frame struggling mode?
Okay, the constant mode of recording and frame struggling. Okay, the constant or continuous mode of recording is nothing but, as I said before, like when you have a laser pulse. Let's say normally you can work with a single cavity laser itself. It doesn't require a double cavity, so you can always use a single cavity laser. You can always pulse this single cavity laser exactly at the center of the exposure time of the camera. So you can always run at the continuous mode. You can always get this time result or time average data. Okay, and then for a frame struggling mode, you can always use double cavity laser in such a way that let's say your exposure time is constant, but only thing is that the time at which the laser pulses are coming, we can always control in such a way that the laser pulse of first laser can be at the end of the first exposure, and second laser pulse can be at the starting of the exposure. So in that way, I can always have a very short DT. We can always do this frame struggling mode. So in this frame struggling mode, we can always only get the ensemble average, not time average.
Okay. So we have another question. Can you explain about the Scheimpflug mount with the PPT with the slide?
Yeah. So Scheimpflug mount, as I said, like the Scheimpflug mount is normally used for stereo, and also you can use it. You should have to use it for Tomo PAV, where you are using, or you can also use it for 2D PAV also. As I said, when the 2D PAV, when you are seeing the camera off axis to the laser plane, definitely I need to use this Scheimpflug adapter, because you are viewing the field of view with an angle. Whenever you are seeing the plane with an angle, we have to use this Scheimpflug adapter. Why we are using it? Because when you are using this camera with an angle, definitely there is no one particular focal plane. There will be a multiple number of focal planes. So the focus quality of the image is reduced. Maybe at one particular place there is a good focus, and other area is not much focus. So this Scheimpflug adapter is kind of a hardware, I mean, which will be connected between the lens and the sensor in such a way that you can always tune the angle. You can tilt the angle in such a way that you can always change the lens plane and the object plane and the image plane, so that you can always incline on a particular point, so that you can always get a well-focused image, even though we are seeing with an angle.
Okay. We have one final question. Can you explain on the cross correlation again?
Yeah. So cross correlation. Okay. So normally when you have two images just taken at delta t time, okay, and assuming that you are taking a very good PAV image, meaning as I said about less reflection, and then you when your particle image is occupying 2 to 4 pixels back into the pixel sensor, and then when your DT is very good, you will get a very good PAV correlation. So cross correlation, how it is done is actually you take two images, first image, second image at delta t time, and you divide these images into small windows, small integration windows. And this small integration window size, as I told you about how to make this size, depends on your flow velocity and field of view. Okay, so you have to decide on the field of view, the integration window size. Okay, so each window size should have at least 10 particles inside. Okay, and then the DT should be selected in such a way that the in plane and out of plane should be 1/4 of this integration window size and then sheet thickness. So if you are doing all this thing and you are dividing these images into small boxes, and you do the cross correlation between first image one integration window to the second image first integration window, you just do the integration the cross correlation for this, you will get the peak correlation peak at one particular point where you can say at most matched pattern. So you get a maximum peak. So that's where the location, the direction of the displacement vector and the magnitude will be pointing to.
Okay. So we have a lot more questions, but we'll try to answer them by through email. Great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. Please feel free to reach us in case if you have any questions in the later. Thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you next time soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.